Here in Gran Turismo 7, there are plenty of cars to play around with. Though not quite as many as previous GT titles, navigating the many options to determine what works best can be tiring and take away from your time spent racing. And while many of the best cars are easy to spot, there are plenty of sleeper vehicles in Gran Turismo 7 that I don't see nearly enough people using. So without further ado, let's get into the best ways to determine if a car is fast here in GT7. Now, in order to discuss speed in Gran Turismo 7, context and what the car is supposed to be racing against is very important. For example, take the Toyota GT1 TS020 and the Porsche 911 RSR. The Toyota GT1 head-to-head is going to beat the Porsche on every single track. With that being said, within its respective class, the Toyota GT1 is a very bad GR2 car, where the Porsche 911 RSR is a very good GR3 car, meaning when you compete in GR3 races with the Porsche, you are going to fare far better in a GR3 race than you are with the GT1 in a GR2 race. So looking at all of these cars within the performance bracket that they're meant to be racing in is very, very important to determining whether or not a car is good within Gran Turismo 7. And lastly, these methods that I'm going to be using to help determine if a car is fast or not are going to be one from the perspective of someone who is in the dealership about to buy a car, and some of the other methods are going to be for people who have already purchased the car. They're looking for whether or not the car will be worth upgrading and maybe racing more often depending on what they're doing with it. So now that we've gone over all of these disclaimers, let's now get into the methods. The first method, and one of the easiest methods to determine whether or not a car will be fast in Gran Turismo 7, is whether or not the car is four-wheel drive. Now, not every single car that's four-wheel drive in Gran Turismo 7 is stellar. With that being said, with Gran Turismo 7's current physics engine, getting traction out of low-speed corners is extremely beneficial for recording fast lap times, especially on the lower grip tire compounds as well as really high horsepower cars. If a rear-wheel drive road car is 800 pp, an equivalent four-wheel drive road car that's 785 pp will perform just as well. This is due to Polyphony Digital's performance point system doing a poor job of predicting the performance advantage that four-wheel drive cars have coming out of lower speed corners. So yes, on average, four-wheel drive cars will be better than rear-wheel drive cars, and this is something that you can verify before you end up purchasing the car. The next criteria is age. Now, similar to four-wheel drive, not all cars that are modern are extremely good. Not all old cars in this game are slow, especially when you could fully upgrade them. Plenty of them end up becoming very, very strong. With that being said, most of the fast cars in this game are the modern ones. This becomes important especially if you do a lot of Group 3 BOP with stock setup racing, which is the most popular form of racing in this game. For the BOP, Polyphony Digital purposely makes the older model year cars slower than the newer model year cars. For instance, if you're looking at the BMW GT3 cars, the M6 is going to be far better on BOP than the M3 and the Z4, and this is by design in order for Polyphony Digital to have the newer model year cars be the competitive options in the GT World Series. But more than GR3 racing, generally speaking, modern cars have more horsepower, a more rigid chassis, and more aerodynamic part options in order to improve their performance over their older model year counterparts. Now again, there are really old cars, especially from the early 2000s, the 90s, that can compete with modern cars, but on average, generally speaking, the modern cars are going to be better, which is why cars like the R32 GTR and the Ferrari F40 are so impressive considering their age and the fact that they're easily able to compete with some of the best cars in this game. This next criteria may sound like an obvious one, but it's a mistake that I see a lot of people miss out on. They'll be asking me, oh dude, what is the best car for this, this, and this? And a lot of the time, the best way to figure out what the best cars are to consult with the community. If you're doing a daily race with Group 3 cars, go into the daily race, run a few races with a car of your choice, and see what everybody else is using. Now, is playing the game in a way that's devoid of any flair or variety the most fun way to play Gran Turismo 7? Not necessarily, but if you're looking for a fair option to be able to compete with people, look at what people are using in lobbies, look at what people are using on the daily race leaderboards, and just pay attention, because chances are if you've asked a question before, there's going to be someone else who has also asked that same question and taken the time to figure it out themselves, so there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Online racing is usually very competitive, so people will set themselves up with the best possible car, so following suit with those competitive drivers is usually a safe bet. Now, a dead giveaway for determining whether or not a car is good in its group or good on its own as a road car is the front downforce level. The reason I specify the front downforce level in particular is because front aero is a very strong predictor of lateral grip. For instance, if a road car has 200 or more front downforce, I consider that to be a very strong number, as long as the maximum allowed rear downforce is able to support the amount of front rotation that you're going to be getting from that front downforce. Usually, if a car doesn't have access to a splitter, it'll either have very little or no front downforce, meaning it's not going to be competitive, especially as you add more horsepower and the car is going to be traveling at higher speeds. Downforce is king in Gran Turismo 7, and while there are exceptions to this rule, such as the Genesis G70 road car and the Suzuki Escudo that don't have the highest front downforce values but are still very strong, for every one of those surprise cars, there's 5 or 6 other cars that underperform expectations simply due to the fact that they don't have enough downforce. The next method I have here is you can use performance points rating. Now this only really works when you're talking about cars within classes. Say you take 2 different GR3 cars, both of them have 500 horsepower and both of them weigh 1400 kilograms. The car with the higher performance points rating is generally speaking going to be the faster car, because while there are many issues with the performance point system, if you're not actively trying to manipulate it, it does do a decent job predicting most cars' performance. So if you're racing within a class in a horsepower or weight limited race, without even driving the car, you can usually tell which cars are going to be the best. Now this of course isn't a perfect science, it's just something to lead you in the right direction and maybe rule out some outlier slow cars before you even drive them. But in order to figure out truly what car is the best in its given category, you do have to test it, which leads me into my last criteria for determining whether or not a car is fast or not, and that is finding a test track where you know what is considered to be a fast time. Usually this is a track that you're very good at and you're able to master and set consistent times. Being able to limit driver variability when testing which car is faster than another is extremely important, as inconsistent driving can lead you down a path where you might think one car is faster than another car, but it's actually not true. For example, myself, I like to test at Trial Mountain. Now this is a very balanced track that has a few straights but not too many. It has sweeping high-speed corners and elevation change at the beginning of the track. It has a lot of medium speed corners in Sector 2, and near the end of the track it has a few hairpins and tighter corners, so it tests a little bit of everything. At Trial Mountain, a really good 700 performance points road car is somewhere around the low 148 range. An average 750 pp car is somewhere in the mid 145s, and an average 800 pp car is somewhere in the 142s. Any car that is a standard deviation above or below this will be considered above or below average, and outliers in either direction can be determined just based on my knowledge of the track and my knowledge on what is considered to be fast. This does take a little bit of work to develop a garage deep enough in order to determine whether or not a car is fast or not, but once you do figure this out, it'll make testing, tuning, and figuring out what a car is and isn't capable of much easier moving forward. Not to mention it'll help you practice your driving quite a bit, and you can see your progression on that individual track. With all of these things considered, what do you guys use to determine whether or not a car is fast or not? What stands out to you in the tuning shop? What stands out to you on track? I'd love to hear your guys' feedback in the comments below. And if you guys do enjoy this video or find the information useful, leaving a like, comment, and subscribing will greatly help me out. The support I've been getting on my last few videos has been absolutely insane, and I really appreciate it. But without letting this drag on too long, I hope you guys have a good night. It's been your boy Dude, and I'm out. Peace.